Hey, welcome. This is a demo of installing JackTrip on Windows 10. In this case, we're going to go to the original source site for JackTrip and on their Windows page, and we're going to download several programs. I'm going to show two ways to get to the download page. One is through our website, Musicians Together Apart, and you click on Software, and that has the Macintosh, Windows, Linux, and Raspberry Pi. So we're going to click on the Windows link, but you don't have to go through our website. You can always go to Google and you can search on JackTrip for Windows, and we will see that it takes us to the top link here, JackTrip for Windows. That's the same one that we reached through our website. And this is the original source at Stanford University. So with JackTrip for Windows, unlike with the JackTrip for Macintosh, you have a few more steps. So one is a driver for sound inside Windows called ASIO for All. Some people will call it ASIO or ASIO. It's the same thing. And that's something that we just download here. Then there's Jack, and Jack is the program that runs this little rectangular thing that controls the sound in Windows and allows JackTrip to send sound out to the internet. And then we're going to install JackTrip. And in this case, JackTrip is not an installation file. It's actually an executable file. You're just downloading the thing that you're going to click on to run it, or the thing that you're going to type, actually. All right, so let's get started. We're going to download ASIO for All, fairly small program. Okay, so we're downloading an installer, and it says it's an unknown publisher. It is fairly long established software, so we've chosen to trust it, and we're not saying one way or the other if users should trust it, but it is open source. All right, and if you feel comfortable with the agreement here, you accept the license and hit next. And we get a select components to install. We do not need to install any of these other ones. We just take the default, the single one. And then we, in our case, are going to just accept the default installation location in the computer. All right, and that's done. Then just for fun, we'll show that it is installed in a folder called ASIO for All that you can see in the Start menu. All right, so now we're going to download Jack for Windows. And so this is also referred to as Jack D, and it's also referred to as QJack CTL. And some people call it QJack Control. So it's all the same thing. The goal is to get this Jack Audio Connection Kit window running. Okay, so it's downloaded the installation file. Again, unknown publisher, it wants to confirm. This is a very long established open source software, so we're going to trust it here. All right, and we're going to read through a lot of some options that you could use to run Jack, but we don't need to know any of this stuff, actually. This will be very easy to run. We don't have to worry about options. All right, I agree with the above terms and conditions, so you'll want to read that and see if you agree or not. We're not recommending one way or the other. And the destination folder, we're going to take the default, and we're going to say, we're going to uncheck Launch Jack Now because we have other stuff to install. All right, we're finished with that. And now the third step here, we're going to download Windows Executable. And we've downloaded here. And you'll notice there's a parentheses 1. That's because this is the second time that I have downloaded it. Now, this is an executable, so when I clicked on it, it did actually look like it's going to start, but this is a relevant piece of information here. This is something that you would get a warning about because it is open source and unrecognized. It did come straight from Stanford University, so you can decide if you trust that or not, but JackTrip users typically do. to get it to do anything, you would put more and then run anyway. But you notice when we run it, nothing happens. Okay. It's not a program that you run to install. It's a program that you type to run. So we'll get into that in a second. So we now have ASIO for All Jack and JackTrip downloaded. And we will, let's see, we will now go to the, the starting point here, which is actually this extra step for Windows. All right, so we're going to click on the wireless network, and there's a properties item here, and this is important. If your network is set for private, okay, and I just clicked it on private, that's a problem because the PC can be discoverable on your local network and your printer and file sharing. And it's good if you print to other printers on your home network, or you have a file sharing going on, or you have a printer on your PC that other people print to. That's a good thing, except that interferes with the fast packet flow of JackTrip. So you want to turn this to public always when using JackTrip. And that means the PC is isolated from this other type of network traffic that is related to the PC being discoverable by people searching for printers or shared printers or file servers. All right, so we're going to leave it at public. And we're going to close this. So again, any network that you have, you'll want to click on the properties to see if it's public or private and make sure it's set to public. Okay. Now, we are going to start with Jack, okay? And we're going to run Jack control. And that, again, is the small rectangular box that you may be familiar with from the instructions and or from Mac OS JackTrip. All right, now we're going to click the setup here and make sure that things look okay. The defaults that we're going with is sample rate 48,000 frames per period, 64. That's a very low latency frames per period. We want to make sure it's set with real-time checked, and port audio is the driver. That's different from Macintosh, where core audio is the driver. So for Windows, it's port audio. And then you click on advanced, and you want to make sure that you have in the server prefix JackD space minus uppercase S. Again, this is a little different from the Macintosh settings. This is for Windows. And the output device is ASIO for All V2, and the same for the input device. All right, we're going to say OK, and then we're going to hit start. And you notice ASIO for All V2 is on the bottom right, so that means that when Jack Audio Connection gets started, ASIO for All started, and that's how it's supposed to work. We don't actually have to start ASIO for All. And if we want to go to see ASIO for All settings, we can click on the green arrow down there in the taskbar. And we'll see that right now when we first run it, it has the Realtek audio. That's like the built-in pink and green or pink and blue 3.5 millimeter 1/8 inch audio jacks on the computer. You can actually use those with JackTrip if you want. But we want to use the M-Track USB interface, and you'll notice that we can't actually cause it to start playing. We can hit that left button and turn it on and off. That's sort of like a power switch for that interface in the ASIO for All program. So what we want to do is select M-Track in the left button there, which is like a power button. And then we're going to do something that causes M-Track to become available with that right arrow. And that is just to stop and start Jack Audio Connection Kit. And then we go back and we bring up the ASIO for All in the taskbar. And we'll notice that the arrow there is the M-Track device. So that's what we want. All right. And then once that's there, we're bringing up a command window. All right. And the command window is in the directory of the computer. For whatever reason, it's defaulting to that directory every time we open it up. A lot of times it'll default to a directory such as home, or no, it'll be like C:\users\Steve, something like that. So the actual folder that has the JackTrip command in it is the same folder that the web browser downloaded it into when we downloaded from the Stanford University site. And so that is, it's C user Wallace downloads in this case. So this is where the JackTrip download ended up. That's just because the browser has it set that way. So we're going to copy that, and we're going to just use that to paste into the command window. You don't have to do a copy and paste. You could type it manually. But we're going to change directory with the cd command, and we paste in that that directory with the C users Wallace downloads, and just typing it again here, and then from here we can do a couple things just to see if JackTrip is in there. Don't necessarily need to, but I know that we had installed JackTrip once before, so we're going to do something a little bit unique here, which is we're going to look with the dir command to see what's in that downloads directory, and you'll see there's a lot of different files that all say JackTrip, and it turns out we have one from before called jacktrip.exe, so we just deleted it with the del command. And again, people don't need to know this entirely, it's just in case you're having it there before, because anytime you download something with the same name, Windows will put a parentheses 1 around it. So we're deleting jacktrip.exe, and then we're going to do the rename command and call this newly downloaded one with the parentheses 1, call that jacktrip.exe. And there's quotation marks there because of the space in the first one, the space before the parentheses 1. Okay, so once we hit the rename command, we will just have the latest and greatest jacktrip.exe file there. And we type JackTrip, we don't have to type .exe for Windows. The exe just tells Windows that it's a program that can be run. So we typed JackTrip just to see if we get a lot of options coming out. So that's like seeing if JackTrip is actually installed and running. And then we want to see if we're on the latest version. So we use a JackTrip minus lowercase v to get the version, and it says version 1.2.1. So that's kind of important to do over, let's say over time. Let's say you watch this video in December 2020 or sometime in 2021. You want to pay attention to whether the latest Windows JackTrip version is something else, and this is how you tell what you've got currently. Do you have the latest or not? So now what we want to do is we want to set the server frames per period settings, believe it or not, and then we can make sure that we're all set up correctly with JackTrip and Jack Audio Connection Kit settings. So in this case, we've got 64 frames per period, and we'll make sure that that's the same in our Jack Audio Connection Kit. 32 is a packet buffer size that helps accommodate poor network quality. And just to note on the server mode, okay, these again are server settings. That's why it says server mode. This doesn't relate to anything we have to do on our individual computers. When you say all clients, everybody will hear just the other people, not themselves looped back. But if you hit all clients with loopback, that means everybody hears themselves and all the other folks. So every musician will hear themselves. The thing we're doing right now is just verifying that the Jack Audio Connection Kit is indeed set to 64 as the server was. And if it wasn't, we would. The main thing is just to make sure that the server settings are matching the Jack Audio Connection Kit settings. And this has to happen for all users. So if you have the server set to a frames per period, also called buffer size, if you have it set to 64, then every musician on that JackTrip session has to also have their settings at 64 in the Jack Audio Connection Kit. And the way we run JackTrip, it's on the screen right now there in the command window, is we do a JackTrip minus capital C, and that stands for client because we have clients and we have servers. So the people with the actual PC that installed this software are the clients. And then that's the IP address. So if you bought if you subscribe to a server from Musicians Together Apart, then we give you the IP address, plus we give you that URL for the configuration of the server settings for frames per period and all that. And then there's a minus Q32 on there, and that's something else that can be done differently for every user. It's up to each user, but it's a ring buffer for those techies that want to know. But the minus Q32 is there and can be minus Q30. It could be minus Q24. That's there to capture any issues with bad network quality coming into a given user. So it's kind of confusing, but every user has to have the same buffer size or frames per period as the server, and we support 32, 64, 128, 256. Everybody has to have that same buffer size in their configuration, but the Q value can vary for people. And you want the Q value to be a little bit lower if you can. So we ran that command, the JackTrip minus C command, and when it says received connection from peer, that means that it's actually connecting and audio is coming through. The peer is the server. And sometimes if you have the wrong frames per period in your Jack Audio Connection Kit compared to the server, you'll get a little message up there that says mismatch, pure buffer size is 64, local buffer size is 128. And then from there you have the choice of changing your frames per period locally or going back to the server configuration like this and changing it there. Also, we're just checking here, this is an example. You can use a packet buffer of 48 if you want. The 48 is, unfortunately, it causes a lot of latency, but it's great if you're doing something like a broadcast over a very long distance where you don't have to have latency concerns. Or if you're doing a voice interview with somebody, the 48 is completely fine with a voice conversation. The latency that you get with 48 is not bad. And again, that's the packet buffer. It's for handling what they call jitter. And so a 48 is great. And when we change the server settings, we generally want to stop and start the Jack Audio Connection Kit and then stop and start JackTrip. So in general, keep in mind the processes sort of have a good sequence. So if you're changing something, like you're changing your Jack Audio Connection Kit to 128, you sort of want to make sure you do the server configuration and then update the server settings, and that takes about 3 seconds. And then if you click return to dashboard, you'll see what the current settings are now. Okay. And then going back to the Jack Audio Connection Kit, just double checking so the frames per period is indeed 128, and you hit start, and then you run that JackTrip command again, and you're going at 128 this time. So the reason for changing all this is basically a matter of fine-tuning based on your network connection performance, and that can be from your home network router, it can be from your internet service provider, It can be due to how many hops of different cities that your packets have to go through to reach the server. And this is why we talk about having servers with a 250-mile distance from the servers. We recommend being within that for best performance. But again, there's people that have no problem with even 1,000-mile distance. It just depends on the type of network and the amount of latency that they can handle, for the beats per minute or whatever, what other aspects they need. But in general, we recommend 64, and the 64 should be achievable within the 250-mile radius. If you can get down to 32, and this is only by experimentation, you get down to 32, and you can use the packet buffer Q value of 24 or 16, that is top performance, very little latency, just like being in the same room pretty much. But again, keep in mind the frames per period has the values of 32, 64, 128, 256. That's what we offer on the server. And the servers are always fixed at 48,000 samples per second, also called 48 kilohertz sampling, 16-bit. So you'll always want to make sure you're set at 48 kilohertz in your Jack audio connection kit. That's sort of a default for most people. That's this DVD quality. CD quality is a little lower. That's the 44-100, but we don't use that in the servers. So the main thing is we're showing here that it works on Windows. And when you have the right settings and you run JackTrip, you get connected with the point at which it says received connection from Pure. And to stop it, I may not have mentioned it earlier, but as long as you've got your cursor in the terminal window there, in the command window also it's called, as long as you're in there, you hit Control-C, and that will stop JackTrip from running. It will still leave Jack Audio Connection Kit running, so that's why you'll want to hit the stop button on that. The server actually doesn't need to be stopped. Believe it or not, the server doesn't need to be stopped. So anyways, if you want to find out more information going forward about updates, such as updates like new Windows releases or new Macintosh releases, things like that, we recommend going to musicianstogetherapart.com, and then on the right side there's a mailing list sign-up form. We promise not to spam you, but we normally just use it for announcing webinars and things like that.